Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. World getting dangerous, topic of our today's conference, and I'm very happy to have the first intervention. My name is Michael Tomaszek. I'm Vice Dean of the Faculty of Law, but I'm as well member of the team of Prague Research Center, and we are very happy, the Faculty of Law is very happy to host you here today. Some of you online, nevertheless, you can see our premises, this hall of Milada Horáková, the Czech lawyer and politician executed by the communist regime in early 1950s. Well, the world is getting really dangerous because of endless COVID pandemic problems. Regardless to this very fact, I'm very happy that the organizers didn't resign to organize it here for some people in the hall and for some people here in Prague, and for the rest of you who are now watching us online. I would like to appreciate the effort of the organizers, and I would like to wish you all success for this conference, and I am very happy when I will be able to read the results and articles as outputs from this event. And now I would like to give the floor to top organizer, Dr. Smetana.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for hosting us here at the Faculty of Law. This is the first time we are holding our conference here, so it's a perfect opportunity to move around and try the premises of our colleagues who are working jointly with us on this project. So let me welcome you all of you here in the here at the faculty, but also all of those who are watching us online on streaming. It was a difficult decision whether we should hold it at least partly physically. We are glad we did it, and but at the same time we are glad that there are also others who have the opportunity to watch us from the distance and at least participate even passively this way. Our project PRCP started almost 4 years ago. The time flies by. As a project that was funded or still is funded by the Charles University. After these 4 years, I'm quite proud to say that we have turned ourselves into a full-fledged research center with about 20 senior scholars, a number of postdocs, number of PhD students from both the Faculty of Social Sciences and the Faculty of Law. This year's conference with the title, A World Turning Dangerous, was selected by our colleague and senior scholar Harald Miller, who's extending his apologies for not being able to participate, both due to the COVID restrictions, but also because of his some health issues. But he asked me to give you all warm regards. He's very much looking forward to meet you all in Prague on some other occasion, because this is, in his words, one of his favorite cities. So there are many things that he's always looking forward to visiting. Obviously, you can see that we have decided to scale down the conference for objective reasons this year, both in terms of the size, but also when it comes to international guests that we normally invite. But I believe it doesn't mean that we are lowering our expectation in terms of quality. So it's a big pleasure for me to welcome 2 panels full of excellent scholars, experts from across fields. We have, when we are considering the topics, we wanted to be to really use the advantage of having 2 faculties working on this project. So one of these panels that we are working with is more oriented towards international law, the other one more towards political science, but I believe that there are still like common common ideas that are connecting them, and this is international security, international conflict, and generally what is the title of the conference, the world turning dangerous, which is somehow highlighting all these anxieties we have. I mean, we could probably be here for several days discussing various topics that would be considered dangerous and the topics that are still considered to be relevant for our research center. We selected these two, one migration and the other one focusing on the problem of so-called hybrid warfare and Russia. And I'm very much looking forward to discussion because these are important topics. We have excellent speakers, excellent moderators who taken on themselves this role, and thank you all for coming here. I'm very much looking forward to discussions, and let's talk together also during the lunch, and it's probably the last opportunity to see ourselves physically for a while, so let's take advantage of that. So thank you very much for coming and enjoy the conference.
Hello, hello. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you here today on our first panel, which is the legal panel. We will be discussing things or issues regarding the international and European migration. I will briefly introduce the structure of our today's discussion. So I will first briefly let every one of our speakers introduce the topic that they are dealing with in the field of international or European migration. This will take us about 50 minutes, and then for the rest of the discussion today, we will focus on the things or issues that were raised during the respective presentations of our speakers, and also we encourage everyone to think of any questions that you may have, because there will be floor to ask them in the second part of our panel today. So I will also introduce myself. My name is Barbara Dufková, and I'm a pre-doctoral research fellow at PRCP and also a PhD student at the Faculty of Law. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the speakers today that we have on the panel. So to my left is my colleague from PRCP, Tomáš Bruner. He's a researcher at the PRCP and a lawyer, a compliance officer in a private corporate sphere. In his research, Dr. Bruner is mainly interested in the relationship of law and power. And in his academic work, he deals with connections of international security and international law, especially regarding the use of force, state responsibility, human security, environmental changes, or cyber security. Next to Thomas, we have Dr. Eliška Flídrová. She's an attorney at law and an assistant professor of international law at Charles University. She's an election observer of OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, and worked for the permanent mission of the Czech Republic to the UN in New York, where she focused on human rights issues. She publishes papers in legal science focused on protection of women and children in international law, border protection, and expulsion of foreigners. So thank you for being with us today. Then I would like to introduce our precious guest, Dr. Dodson Kapitreva. She's a respected expert in European and administrative law, which are both reflected in her academic work. She achieved postgraduate education at Faculté de Droit Comparé in Strasbourg, and currently she works at her other alma mater, which is the Faculty of Law of Charles University. She has published several publications concerning Czech asylum, migration, and integration policies, as well as European asylum system. So welcome. And then I would like to introduce our last guest, which is Martin Rozumek. He's a lawyer with a JD in International Public Law from the Masaryk University. Since 2002, he's the executive director of the Organization for Aid to Refugees, which is a non-profit, non-governmental organization providing refugees and other foreigners in the Czech Republic with legal and social assistance. In the past, Dr. Rozumek worked for UNHCR in the Czech Republic and Pakistan, in private law firms, and in the Brno-based Society of Citizens Assisting Immigrants. I would also like to introduce Dr. Stojanov, who has just arrived, if you don't mind. He's an environmental and population geographer focusing on the impacts of environmental change, migration, and population dynamics. He's an assistant professor at the Mendel University and has a rich experience working at various international and Czech research institutions. Dr. Stojanov was awarded a certificate for climate change and its impact at Brown University. And in early 2018, his paper was ranked among the top 1% of most cited papers in social sciences at Web of Science. So, welcome. Thank you all for participating. And now, without further ado, I would like to give every one of our speakers the floor to introduce what they focus on in the field of international or European migration. So, please, Tomáš, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Bára. And thank you also for inviting me. Normally, I work in an insurance sector. I'm a lawyer, and my task is to have a look at the risks which may occur or materialize in 20 or 25 years, and to prepare the insurance contract for those risks. So this kind of academic activity is especially valuable for me because it can enrich my view on the risks that we may face in 20 or 25 years. Otherwise, at Peace Research Center Prague, I'm a researcher and I focus on security aspects of or interlinks of international law and security. Here, I would like to tell you a story about migration and international organization, the most important one, and this is the United Nations Security Council. So my topic here that I would like to tell you about in 5 minutes is UN Security Council and migration. My point here is that environmental migration as a kind of a new migration will probably or has the potential to switch the UN Security Council from reactive role to a proactive role, and I'll be explaining this more into detail. UN Security Council has been quite active in the field of migration, but in a reactive way. This means that the Council only reacted to the threats that only materialized or that occurred. For example, in 1998, after Rwandan genocide, the UN Security Council started solving so-called Great Lake refugee crisis and safeguarding that the migrant camps must be really humanitarian, that they must be spared of any military activities. The same occurred after 9/11, when the UN Security Council said that a kind of asylum seekers and migrants must be separated from terrorists who misuse this protection, again, reactive mode. And the point that I'm interested in was 2007, when UN Security Council firstly dealt with climate migration as something entirely new. In 2007, small island states in Pacific Ocean, such as Kiribati, Tuvalu, and other countries, addressed the UN Security Council and said, hey, Council, look at the situation which we face. Our conditions are deteriorating, and there might be waves of migration that could really have the similar impacts as armed conflict. This is warming war. Cold War ended, and this is warming war. We are facing global warming, and as we are small islandic states, due to sea level rise, we will soon face such a terrible conditions that our population will spread to other countries because it will be not possible to live here. And the UN Security Council was not able to find a consensus whether this is a security threat or not. And the same situation repeated in 2011, 2015, 2018, and 2019. So again and again, the small island states asked the Council do something with the climate change migration, and the Council was unable to do anything. There were 3 groups of countries, small island states, which tried to open this venue, then rapidly developing countries that feared that United Nations Security Council could interfere with their industrial development, saying to prevent further climate change, you must stop development. Your industrial development to a certain extent, and then there were developed countries trying to find certain middle ground. But so far, no decision has been made. And what I'm interested in here is that the climate migration really, it's not a probability, it's a certainty. It will occur, and it will very probably face the UN Security Council to solve this issue. And the UN Security Council to do this will require to change or to switch from reactive role to proactive role, so to do something entirely new. So this is my quite international perspective, quite security-related perspective, and I'm really looking forward to discuss this and other national and regional aspects of migration with my colleagues that are here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tomáš, for your introduction. I would invite Dr. Eliška Friedrich to provide her view on international migration or European migration, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my colleague Tomáš Bruner, for introducing what he does. And I'd like to now talk about a bit what I do and what comes to today's topic, which will be the international migration. Again, I'm very happy that we can see each other here today, offline and also online. And thank you very much for inviting me. So when I was thinking what I'm going to talk about, because I would like to do a very short 10 minutes introductory speech, opening speech on my topic. I do specialize in my academic field in so-called non-refoulement principle. And when we look at today's news, basically every day, we hear about the situation in Poland at the Polish borders. What's important to mention is, and we need to do it again and again, is the principle of non-refoulement. That's what I would like to introduce today. I know that not all of you are lawyers, so I'll try to be as clear as possible to explain a little bit what's going on when we talk about the non-refoulement. So non-refoulement principle is the core principle of international law, of universal international law, human rights law, humanitarian law, refugee law. What it means, if I were to summarize in very brief words what it means, basically stipulates that no one can be returned to or transferred to a territory where his or her life would be in danger. This is in very simple words. When we look, and since I'm a lawyer, when we look at the legal instruments where we can find it, there are loads of legal instruments of a different nature where we can find it. That would be in universal instruments. We can find it in the Convention Against Torture. We can find it in the ICCPR. We can find it explicitly mentioned. We can find it implicitly mentioned then in the later case law. What's important for us right now when we think about the situation at the Polish-Belarusian borders would be to mention that this principle of non-refoulement will find in Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights. And there's extensive case law that talks about how is it applied and what it actually means. We can also find it, of course, in refugee law, in the convention relating to the status of refugees, the Geneva Convention, and to a certain extent, it's also in the international customary law. So when we think about the situation in Poland, there are two main things that comes into question. First, that will be, is there a breach of the Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which is the prohibition of torture, but as I said, it's also, thanks to the case law, it's also interpreted as the non-refoulement principle. And then also the Article 4 of Protocol number 4 of the European Convention of Human Rights, which prohibits so-called collective expulsion. There are basically, when I try to look at, and I have not been at the Polish borders, but when I look at the media news, at what the journalists who are able to actually see the situation, what news are they bringing, in my view, there are two situations. One is so-called pushbacks that Poland might be doing with persons who already entered the territory, and then also situation of not allowing people to go to Poland to be able to apply for international protection. When we look at law, when we look at the case law, the European Court of Human Rights, it might give us an answer to how to judge the situation of what Poland is doing. I'll probably not be talking about the jurisdiction right now, but it's also important. Then maybe you might have questions. I don't want to take too much of a time. But when we look first at the situation of so-called pushbacks, it's not the first time we actually see it. If you remember, and you might remember, there was a time where Italy and Libya were doing basically the same thing. It was in 2008, 2012, and then this practice was stopped by a very landmark decision of the European Court of Human Rights in Hissi, Jama, and others versus Italy, which said, and it's related to jurisdiction as well, actually, which said that as long as the Italian authorities are conducting an effective control of persons who are being returned to Libya, Italy is responsible for breaching the Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, and also the prohibition of collective expulsion. So the pushbacks, when it comes to the pushbacks, the answer might be quite clear, because Polish authorities, if they are pushing back people, not allowing them to apply for international protection, pushing them back to Belarus without actually assessing their individual situation, in my opinion, and I'll be happy to discuss, there would be a clear breach of Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights, and it might be a breach of Article 4 of Protocol 4 of the European Convention on Human Rights. When we look at the second situation I mentioned, by not allowing people to cross the borders, there's certainly a group of people who is not able to cross the fence between the Polish and Belarusian borders. What does it mean? Is Poland responsible? Could there be a jurisdiction of Poland for not letting people in? You might remember there was a very famous, again, decision in 2020, which was NDNNT versus Spain, which caused a bit of a mayhem between us academics, which said basically that when a person who tries to cross the borders does it illegally, not at the entry point for that country, it might be their fault that they were not able to lodge a claim. That's probably what Poland would try to invoke, because they would say, well, they are trying to cross the borders illegally, let's apply this case law and see. In my opinion, yes, there might be a way of Poland trying to invoke this exception, but also we must not forget that, again, Poland, and there's a previous case law of the European Convention, European Court of Human Rights, and I'd like to mention the one MK and others versus Poland, that says as long as there's no actual possibility of the person trying to cross the border to apply for international protection, we might not invoke this exemption. Still, Poland would be responsible for at least getting the people to apply for international protection, at least scan their applications and assess their individual situation to be able to ensure that the principle of non-refoulement will not be breached in case of these individuals. So in my opinion, we are coming to a situation that's quite similar to what we experienced with Italy and Libya, although the details, of course, were different. And it brings a discussion on whether Poland is in line with international law or not. And I'll probably just stop here, and I'll be very, very happy to have the discussion further on this topic, and I'm sure at least one of my colleagues will comment on that situation too, and I'm very looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction. We're all looking forward to discussion that we will have on this interesting topic. I now invite Dr. Stojanov to introduce his interest in international migration. Please.
Thank you to having me here. It looks that probably I'm alone one who is not lawyer here. So I'm geographer and environment and population geographer. Working on a topic international migration almost 2 decades here. I'm this one who was bringing the topic of environmental migration as well as the migration and development to the Czech Academy here in Czech Republic. As I mentioned, I worked on the topic for the last 20 years almost, so maybe I can present our last research activities. So for the last 2-3 years, I'm focusing for a topic of climate mobility and cities, because we believe all together with a colleague from Columbia University and a new school in New York that the cities will be the new destination areas for, or they are already the new destinations areas for a climate migration. And we believe that the context of development aid must go to the cities, to the new destination areas, instead of try to stop people, stop in their places of origin, which are not available for living because the living condition was changing because of the climate changing. So that's why we believe that we have to change the official aid, official development assistance approach to help cities and coastal areas or in capitals, especially in developing countries, because this will be the areas which will be affected by the newcomers. And we don't want that people will be live in slums and favelas in Latin America, etc. The second topic we try to develop for last years is changing of migration governments and migration policies. Because since the last 6 years, when started so-called firstly refugees crisis, then migration crisis, and now I don't know which crisis is now connected with the migration. So we believe that the approach of the governments in developed countries must to change, because there is definitely economic benefits of the immigration here, and also emigration from the perspective of the developing countries. So the research coming to the how can we change the migration governments from the perspective of the developing countries is necessary, especially if we count, and I'm also working with economics on the topic, when, for example, other flows like official development aid, foreign direct investment are not so effective if we compare with the remittances flows. Yeah. Last topic let's say we try to bring on an academy on a global level is the topic of smart migration. Yeah, we started to develop this concept of smart migration a few years ago, when I started to the survey within the new immigrants in 2015, when they started this huge flows of people coming to Europe. And we started to do the surveys firstly in Greece when I was on holiday at the time, and finally in Vienna, because we didn't have immigrants from the flows here. So that's why working in Brno, so we have close to Vienna than to Prague, I'm sorry. So that's why we were very fragmented, traveling also with the students from here, from Prague, to Vienna. And we started to find that the role of digital technologies, digital equipment, smart equipments, if you want, so it's completely changing the migration flows, migration routes, and also the sharing the information. So these people, when they cross the border to Europe, so they have, let's say, live information when they were changing every minute, and they were using the smart equipment for their travels, don't need as smugglers, for example. However, the role of smuggling, it's also connected with the topic because the situation here in Europe is completely different, as was already mentioned by Eliška, and I believe that also Martin will speak about the situation in Libya and the smuggling issue at the minimum based on his excellent speech for Czech radio broadcasting on a Sunday. So, so I believe that this issue are connected with the concept of smart migration. And the last one, if I may, is a topic of migration development, which is relatively new here in Czech Republic. So as I already mentioned, my concern is especially on the remittances flows and their impact of the impact on the development in economically poor countries. And that's it. About our research outcomes, maybe we can discuss during this plenary discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Stojanov. Now I invite Dr. Pítrová to introduce her current focus in European migration.
Well, I've prepared some slides for you, but as far as we have only short time for presentation, so I will go quickly through that if you can help me. So first of all, I would like to focus on a common European asylum system as a legal framework of the European Union for asylum. And first of all, from the legal point of view, it is necessary to distinguish between the migrant and a refugee, and what is the difference between the migrant and the refugee. So those who live or flee their country or live their country voluntarily, seeking some better economic conditions or something like that. So these are ordinary migrants. On the other side, these who are forced to flee their home countries because of some danger, etc. You know it from Geneva Convention. We can call the asylum seekers or international protection seekers. That's why I would like to concentrate only on refugee status and the procedure for application for this status. As you can see at the next slides, so the legal framework of the refugee law is a very complicated one. Eliška has already mentioned some items, some instruments. At the top, I would mention the Convention on Refugees from 1951, which defines in Article 14 the refugee and the conditions to qualify as a refugee. These are famous 5 Geneva conditions, you know, probably if you are interested in the topics. The next layer in Europe especially, it would be the European Convention of Human Rights. Eliška will be is an expert in this. And last but not least, it is the European framework, which is the Common European Asylum system, and at the bottom it is the national regulation. Nowadays it's only a very narrow space for national regulation in this area in European Union. If you look at the situation in the European Union, so it is regulated at the level of primary law within the area of freedom and justice, and this is the legal base for secondary legislation. I put some examples of secondary legislation in force at the next slide. That means primary legislation, Charter of European Charter of Fundamental Rights, which refers to the Geneva Convention on refugees, and then there is a bunch of secondary legislation, among others the system of asylum, Dublin system. Then there are some important directives such as qualification directive and the others you have mentioned, return directive and family reunification and all the others. This system was built in the relatively calm time, and in 2015, it was quite visible that it is not well prepared for crisis. So that's why the first package on migration was presented by the Commission. The part of it was formed by Dublin IV regulation proposal. This Dublin IV, predecessor of this Dublin IV regulation proposal was an ad hoc measure by the Commission and the Member States of relocation of applicants for asylum status. And these two ad hoc decisions, were adopted to relocate the applicants among all the member states, and it was based on the principle of solidarity and burden sharing. Very quickly you remember those decisions. There are the numbers of those decisions in the slide. And it was responded by action from the member state, from some member states, which was not admitted by the court. And then, as you remember from 2020, there was a decision of the court concerning 3 member states, including the Czech Republic, saying that not respecting or implementing those measures is a breach of EU law, but it was an academic decision because these measures have not been implemented in fact. Later on, the negotiation of Dublin IV, which included permanent relocation mechanism, continued. But at the beginning of the new Commission term, it was withdrawn by the Commission and replaced by the new proposal, and I will concentrate on that only on that asylum procedure, which was called, I hope I remember it Asylum and Migration Management Regulation. It is forbidden to call it Dublin IV, but Dublin V, but I call it Dublin V. It was presented as a house with 3 stores or 3 layers. At the top of this, there would be the communicational partnerships with the third countries. This is a very criticized part of the regulation and of the whole package. You have mentioned it to some camps or hotspots to be built outside the European Union. The other layer should be the protection, better protection of borders of the European Union, external borders, Frontex and all the other things, you know, from the development of and adoption, some of the proposals of the package were adopted already. And the third layer, which is of my interest, was the change of internal rules of asylum procedure within the European Union as a whole. So this is the center. What is the principle of this new proposed regulation as far as the asylum procedure is concerned? So I would say that it has not changed. The first state of entry remains irresponsible, but there are introduced some institutes or measures, permanent measures, like relocation scheme, permanent relocation scheme. And as an alternative to this permanent relocation scheme, the institute or measure, which is called return sponsorship, was introduced in this proposal. What does that mean? Permanent relocation principle is built on that burden sharing and the thing you know from these ad hoc measures from 2019, was that, or 16 two decisions. And this return sponsorship means, but it is very, let's say, I introduce it very shortly, that if you do not want to accept, according to the distribution key, the applicants for asylum in your own territory, so this state can sponsor asylum procedure in another member state, and if it is not successful and the return procedure is not successful within 8 months for those who have not qualified for status of refugee, then these applicants or non-qualified refugees, that means migrants, for some other reasons, would be transferred to the territory of that state which sponsors, and this state will be responsible for the return. At the end, I would like to say a few, we skip some slides and get to the end. I would like to comment on this new proposal, which is now being deliberated at the level of the European Union, and I do not think that it will be without problems adopted by all the member states, especially in the situation in the Polish borders nowadays. So I would like to comment on 3 things, let's say. First of all, is this proposal for streaming of the applicants. That means that those who come from, who would come from the third safe country will be subject to, let's say, fast-track procedure. It is criticized because of the fact that the principle of non-refoulement is not taken into consideration that much, and the other will go through ordinary procedure for application for international protection. The other thing I would like to comment is the permanent relocation mechanism, which could be a bit reduced by some financial support. But on the other hand, you cannot force the refugees to stay in a territory of the state. That's the problem. It is connected with the problem of secondary movement, it is called. And this is criticized by not only by member states, but by organization offering protection for refugees, NGOs and so on. And the last but not least is the return sponsorship, because it's from a frying pan to the fire. This is just postponed relocation, in fact, because, as you probably know, the return policy of the European Union is not that successful. At the end, I would like to say that to show you the last picture, you know, probably from the lessons of history. If you look at it, you can put that at the bottom of this picture, that this is these are the streams of migration in these days, in fact. So I would like to stress that this is not only the crisis of 2015, but it will just be the part of our lives in the future, and it is necessary to prepare the legal framework at the level of the European Union and to reform the common European asylum system. But I don't know if this proposal I've commented is the best way to do it. At the end, I would like to thank you for the attention, and I would like to inform you that we organize within the project, which is sponsored by the Charles University within the framework of the EU 4+ initiative for the 3rd year, the summer school for asylum, European asylum law. And this year it was not in distance, and it was really moving and very successful. Students and postdocs from Heidelberg participated, also Milano, Sorbonne, and Czech Republic, and I think that's all. So if you are interested in future, I hope I will find some money for that. Let's say you can participate or lecture at this summer school, which is organized usually in September. So thank you for your attention, and I'm sorry to be that long, but women are usually longer than men.
We thank very much Dr. Pítrová for the timely introduction or review of the ensuing legislation at the European level. And now I invite Dr. Rozumek to introduce what he focuses on in the area of international migration. Please.
Okay, thank you for your invitation. Thank you for having me here. It's nice to be here in this panel. It's very interesting to listen what you said. And when I hear Robert speaking, I think I would like to work with him. It's a pleasure to work on such interesting topics and with good results. So congratulations. You know, I work for OPU for more than 20 years, and OPU is a non-governmental organization helping refugees in the Czech Republic since 1991. We started with first refugees coming from Bosnia to the Czech Republic. And we employ some 15 lawyers traveling every week to all detention centers, reception centers, accommodation centers where the refugees or asylum seekers or detainees live. We visit also the integration centers where the successful recognized refugees or holders of subsidiary protection live. And we go to courts. We win very often at courts. The ministry doesn't like us because of that, so they want to currently limit our work severely, but I think we will survive, and we will stand behind refugees in future as well. We also work with on very specific topics in the migration or refugee field. So I think we are the leading organization helping stateless persons in the Czech Republic, which is a difficult work. We won nice cases at the Supreme Administrative Courts and other courts, and then as a reward we got the amendment to the Asylum Act that basically damaged our successes and our rights gained for stateless persons, but they are here, they will be here. We also work currently on a project concerning trafficked refugees, which is, let's say, a small topic in the Czech Republic, but very large, for example, in Italy, where I would say every second refugee woman is trafficked or subjected to sexual exploitation. And my speech will be very short. I have just 3 short points, and they concern challenges or gaps in the current international refugee law, in my opinion. I think the international refugee law is a gift. We are celebrating the 70th anniversary of the 1951 convention. I'm happy the convention is here and that it has not been changed, because I believe all the changes would be worse than what we have now in the current climate. But in my opinion, the international refugee law is constructed in a way that it gives protection to refugees, so they are entitled to refugee status if they fulfill the criteria of the refugee definition. But there is no way how they can travel to faraway countries to get this protection. So basically, it is constructed in a way that they should stay in the neighboring countries. In the ideal world, if the neighboring country is the signatory to the 1951 convention, they should stay there forever. So let's take the example of Iran. So they host 4 million Afghans for, I would say, decades, not years. And they were able, this is the last information from yesterday, to vaccinate all 4 million Afghans in Iran against COVID, regardless of their status. So no matter if they are recognized or not recognized, so they just vaccinated everybody. But I think this is one of the problems, that refugees should stay, according to international law, basically in the neighboring countries if they give them protection. So there is no right to travel to the US or wherever. And a similar problem in what I see, maybe you disagree, is in the EU law. Basically, the Dublin procedure obliges an asylum seeker or refugee to stay forever in the first country. It means that until the person is granted, let's say after 5 years, the EU permanent resident permit, the Greece, Italy, Malta, Cyprus, they should keep all the burden according to the current rules. There are no basically ways how to enable refugees to come legally to countries like the Czech Republic from Greece, if there is no close family link. But even the family reunification right is very often not respected by the Western countries. So in my opinion, there are thousands of people in Greece with close relatives in Western countries who are unable to claim the right to family unification and risk their lives on the dangerous Balkan route to join their families in Western Europe. I think it could be also the case of the persons at the Polish-Belarusian border. I'm sure many of them have relatives in Western countries. And then last point, so the law is constructed in a way that the European asylum law, that asylum seekers should stay basically forever in Greece, which is totally unfair. The Dublin must change, but you know, in the European law, you need agreement of the EU 27, and we are happy with this fact that there are problems somewhere in the south and that we have almost nobody in the system. So there will be always opposition of the northern, or even worse, from the Central European countries against any reforms of Dublin, because we don't care that in Spain they have received this year 37,000 of newcomers. In Italy, more than 60,000 newcomers. We have our few hundreds, and we do not want to change the policy of the whole EU. And we are not alone. It's the same for all Baltic states, V4 countries. So I'm not very optimistic when it comes to any positive changes in the EU asylum system. And my last point, where I see the gap, is already what Robert mentioned. Certainly at climate migration. It's interesting that the UNHCR Global Trends Report 2020 mentioned more than 35 million climate migrants or internal or displaced persons in 1 year alone. And it's true that very often they stay in the country affected by the climate disaster. Very often they go to the cities. But what is interesting, UNHCR also mentioned in the report that at the end of the year, there were still 8 million climate refugees displaced in this year who could not return to anywhere. So they are somewhere in the countries of origin or in the neighboring countries. And here, UNHCR is not happy to open the definition of refugee, the definition of the refugee, and I fully understand it. I think it will be a bad road to open it, because then there will be different attempts to deteriorate the current level of rights they have. And it's true that in their mandate of UNHCR already internally displaced persons are included, stateless persons are included. So I think this new, let's say, new topic of climate migration, climate refugees, requires a new response from the international law. So these are my 3 challenges or gaps that we are facing, and I think we see it everywhere, be it in Belarus, in Greece, in Libya, in Italy, this problem that basically the refugees should stay in the country that is closer or the closest to their country of origin is a big problem. And I will be happy to discuss the possibility of opening more resettlement ways or discussing again relocation within the EU, because we cannot look at Malta not respecting the rights of asylum seekers for years and years, keeping them in terrible detention places and giving them advice how they should improve their system, and that we could send an expert from the Czech Republic to advise them how to keep with the numbers they have. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction of the topic. So now we see that we have very interesting issues to discuss from both purely legal perspective and also from the practice. So I would like first to invite anyone in the audience, if you have any questions that you would like to ask based on what our speakers discussed. Yeah, so I'll just pass the microphone, I think.
Hello. I would like to thank the panelists for a very interesting discussion. And there are some problems regarding migration that have not been discussed. From my perspective as a security policy analyst, we have to ask ourselves if our system, not only the border protection system, but also social system, healthcare system, is robust and secure, and security systems like police are robust enough to handle mass waves of migration. Unfortunately, for the most European countries, the answer is no. If every year, as Martin says, will come several tens of thousands of refugees to the centers of concentration, like Italy, like Spain, like Malta, like Greece, those countries are not able to properly take care of them. And this is something that is prevalent across Europe. I think that given the recent probability of worsening mass displacement in Central Africa because of climate change, which could send several millions or maybe lower tens of millions of people, we will not be able to take care of them. We will not be able to process them, and we will not be able to provide them with the basic needs. I have seen the refugee camps. There's nothing to be proud of. It's filthy, it's smelly, you don't want to be there. I think that our only chance to prevent this, and actually there's one element that has not been discussed also. We have to focus on the cohesion of our own populace. This is something that the migration is very divisive across all of the Europe. It's not only Poland, it's not only Hungary. We tend to point finger at them and say, no, you are not humanitarian enough. It's everywhere. This rift in our population is prevalent, it will stay, and we cannot turn a blind eye to that. We have to take into account the cohesion of our population, because, as has been said, the utilization of mass migration by other states, as we now see in Poland and Polish-Belarusian border, where planes from Russia are taking migrants into Belarus, and they're driving them to the border. This has been used to coerce the European Union and to misuse our humanity to force the dissolution of the cohesion of the European populace. We cannot let that happen, and we cannot let ourselves be coerced into any kind of action here. The situation from my human point of view is very sad. But from point of view of a person that is partially responsible for the security of the state and of the European Union, we cannot let ourselves be coerced into anything that would compromise our security and our cohesion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. So I will pass the microphone for.
You know, I'm known as a activist, but in my view, Germany needs annually 400,000 immigrants. I think the main worry of our companies, of our Chamber of Commerce, is that they make it easy for migrants to come, because then it means that the hundreds of thousands of foreigners working here could easily take the jobs in Germany and start working there. We are, when you look at the demographics, we are not in a better situation than Germany. We currently, according to the information from the Interior Ministry, nearly 900,000 people foreigners live in the Czech Republic. It included everybody, EU nationals, non-EU nationals, asylum seekers, everybody. And I think the politicians already understand that we need migration. And usually what decides is the economy. So if the economy goes up, you have no way how to somehow stop newcomers from coming. They will be coming because the companies in the Czech Republic last 10 years from the crisis in 2009. They need more and more people to come. And in my view, asylum seekers, refugees could be easily included because they are, you know, we are not interesting for them. They go all usually to the places where they have someone to help them at the beginning, community, families. So I'm pretty sure that in this hunger for the workforce, we could easily include, if not thousands, then many more hundreds of refugees. And we need them. We need migrants. We cannot live without them. You know, the demographic tendency is so bad that I think the main worry is that Germany make it easier and the people would go from us to the economy.
Yeah, I would like to confirm and sign everything what Martin said. Is it working? Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. And yeah, I would like to confirm and sign everything what Martin said. So that's the reality. Really, Germany showed us that it works. We can do it. They did in past. I think that everybody, each of us now, the story about the Gastarbeiters, the first flow from Turkey, and now it looks like another wave of immigrants coming to Germany. I'm strongly believe that Angela Merkel will have a status in Germany in future because of the policy, because she received for Germany about minimum 1 million skilled immigrants to the German economy. Because at the time when this huge wave of immigrants started, at the time the Deutsche Bank published the report that German economy will need another 4 million qualified immigrants within, I don't know, next 5 or 10 years. So I don't remember this year exactly. So, and based of these numbers, so it was a huge opportunity for the German economy, because based of our research, field research with these immigrants, not from only the Syria but also from Afghanistan, Iraq, and Iran and other African countries, we received interesting information that more than 50% of them were skilled immigrants with at the minimum secondary school. Many of them now English or German languages, so they were speaking with us in German and with our English, or at the minimum any household member now that one of that language. So it means that these people were coming here with some skills which are necessary for our economy. Yeah. So and about the Czech companies, more recently, just 2 or 3 weeks ago, we published the journal paper, which is based probably on the biggest survey about the migration and development here in Czech Republic. And our outcome is that Czech Republic really need immigrants. We need a labor. What's the problem is that our migration policy is based on the idea we need a labor, but we don't need a people. We don't need a human. So we forgot on our migration policy that these laborers are also humans. That's the problem, I believe.
Thank you very much for raising this comments and questions. Bit of a difficult question as the first one, but these are relevant points, what you said. And I must agree with Martin and Robert said about, I understand your point. What we must, however, take in account and have in mind every time we speak about mass migration is what Lenka said before, differentiate between who's a migrant and who's a refugee. We do have certain obligations that we set as a legal framework towards refugees that we did after the Second World War. Then we also have a certain legal framework when it comes to migrants. But this is not as difficult when it comes for providing for healthcare, providing for housing, and so on when it comes to regular migrants. what, in my opinion, is the core and the key to solving, because there will be migration. There was migration, as we saw. There was an excellent slide, and there will be migration. What I think we should concentrate on is the legal migration and simplifying the process. Speaking from my experience and as an attorney at law, I do it on everyday basis, working with legal migration, which is incredibly difficult. All of my clients are highly skilled diploma holders, and it's still very difficult. We need them. I work for the employers. We need them, but usually they give up in the middle of the process. They say, well, we just cannot wait for a year to get some kind of a permit. So in my opinion, because we do need the labor really, so the core is concentrate on simplifying legal migration and really have the legal ways. Then we wouldn't need to deal with the mass migration where it's really difficult to differentiate who's a regular migrant and who's a refugee. If we make it simple for people who really just want to come and work. And then what's also difficult, and Robert mentioned it, dealing with smugglers. You mentioned also the Belarus and planes bringing people from Russia to Belarus borders. Yes, this is a pressure, and I do understand the position of states, of course. Without the state security, then we will have nothing to provide if our security is threatened. So legal migration and dealing with smugglers. I know it's very, very simple. It's very hard to do in practice, but in my opinion, this would be the at least try to solve the situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eliška. I fully share your opinion that it is necessary to distinguish between migrants and asylum seekers. As an instrument, the asylum was not meant like a permanent instrument. That means that asylum is a time-limited instrument. You offer safe stay for a person, and then after the situation changes in the home country, the person can go back to the home country. That is the purpose of that instrument of international protection. On the other side, I think the Czech Republic has a program, I wouldn't be that strict to the Czech government, has a program for legal migration for those who want to stay and work and live in the Czech Republic. And these are not mostly the people from Afghanistan, Somalia, and some other states, you know it better, that those migrants have diaspora in other countries already, such as Sweden and Germany and so on. So it is necessary to distinguish between asylum seekers and asylum status, and on the other side, legal migrants which would like to stay and work in the Czech Republic, and this is necessary to support from the side of the Czech Republic, I think.
Okay, thank you also from my side for raising very good argument. Actually, the same argument was raised by small island states in the Pacific Ocean when they went to UN Security Council, and they said exactly this. We are on the front line of a fight against climate change. We suffer climate change results today. Africa, as you have mentioned, Central Africa will suffer the worst consequences tomorrow and already is suffering something now, and other countries will suffer it the day after. So they addressed the UN Security Council with the same argument, like this is going to be terrible and we have to prepare. And from my point of view, analyzing the UN Security Council, the most striking thing was the paralysis. The fact that the UN Security Council kept solving this 5 times again and again and didn't achieve any kind of consensus. It could say, well, this is not a security issue, this should be addressed by some kind of other UN organization or kind of other UN body. It could say, well, we will address this issue under certain circumstances, for example, by early warning system, or they could say we will never address it. But the worst thing was that they were not able, the countries at the open sessions were not able to achieve a consensus. And that is something which relates to what you have said about the cohesion. Well, the cohesion is important. In your case, it was the cohesion of European population. In this case, it was the cohesion of international community. It's a kind of a starting point, but it's definitely not the only point, and it will not solve the issue per se. It has to go hand in hand with other issues, for example, addressing the root cause of the problem, or clearly defining who is responsible for what, like saying, well, UN Security Council is not the appropriate body, don't waste your time going there, or well, we will solve it in this way or that way. That was just my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank all our speakers for the comments. So I invite. We have a. Okay, sure.
One sentence to Eliška. As there are no legal ways for refugees to come, then very often smuggling saves lives, unfortunately.
Yeah, smugglers are not always the bad person. Remember what's happened in our history. Yeah, it was the smugglers which helped the people to leave communist regime. Yeah, so yeah, this is not a white and black only.
Thank you for very interesting remarks. Yeah, sure. Okay.
Thank you. Just a short point. I'm Ondřej Olšanský, currently working with Atlantic Forum, formerly with MFA. Just one short comment. We have to take into account the countries that these migrants and skilled migrants are coming from. If we do not take into account their skill, we are very much contributing to the brain drain of those countries. We have to take into account stability and long-term benefit for the countries, and perhaps not even our own economy, because what will happen, for example, with Central African countries, if all the skilled people will flee? That's one point. And addressing Robert's point with smugglers, there have been basically a lot of beneficial and good history moments of smuggling, but we have to take into account how the smuggling looks today, and it's basically mafia, which deprives all the migrants of their all wealth, of their all resources, and leaves them stranded on a border. I think those people we should not talk to them. They should be in jail. We should try to dismember those organizations and dismember them with all the legal power we have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. So I provide floor to our speakers.
Just a very short question. I must add, I think we should decide who is responsible for the situation of the Polish border, whether it is Poland or Belarus. And I'm persuaded that it is not Poland.
Okay. Thank you for comments, Andrzej. About the brain drain, that's my very favorite topic, and unfortunately we don't have a days for discussing the issue here, or maybe weeks. But I would like to maybe do some advertisement for me. Since the last Saturday started the serial about the migration within the Meteor. This is a scientific program of Czech radio broadcasting. You can check online also. And when I had a speech about the brain drain, like a myth which is very frequently used and based also on our research, etc. So sorry, we don't have a time for that, but please check it. I think that I used interesting argument. And about the issue of the smuggling. So firstly, I didn't speak about these gangs in Libya. That's definitely evil, maybe I can say, because best of stories of my respondents when I was living and working in Italy, and I had some couple of respondents, especially women, which were coming from these countries. You mentioned Sahel countries and Western African countries, including men. So that was a really horrible stories. Nobody wants to hear it, and I believe that this is a clear evil. Yeah, but still, yeah, as Martin said, if you don't have any opportunity. Anyway, I think you are lawyers. Please tell me if I am correct. From the perspective of asylum seeking, when you have to cross the border to ask for asylum, and so you have to illegally leave your country of origin because you are at risk of your life, for example, or to be in jail, etc. So you have to illegally leave your country and illegally cross the country, yeah, the border. Sorry, cross the border. After that, you can legally ask about asylum, but first step is illegal. So that's why I for the last year, I really don't want to use, and when I tell to my students, I really dislike this label illegal migration, illegal migrant. Maybe unrecorded, maybe unofficial, something like that. But you know, within this term is included some illegal step. But after that, based on the international agreements, we can speak about the asylum seekers or refugees, etc. So that's my post, like in law. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I'll just briefly comment to what you, Robert, said from the legal point of view. Being made a lawyer, I still have to comment. And to what you said about the illegal entry. Yes, that happens quite a lot. It doesn't have to be 100% times where an asylum seeker or seeker of international protection crosses the border illegally. But if they do, the Convention relating to the status of refugees from 1951 already knew that this might be the case. So in Article 31, we'll find a rule which says that in case a refugee crosses the borders illegally, there will be no punishment for that, and will not look at him as being illegal migrant. It will not have any effect for his international protection asylum claim. The problem is that it only includes refugees. So you have to fulfill the definition of a refugee as stated in Article 1A of the Refugee Convention. But if this is the case, and just to mention, a refugee doesn't become a refugee with having the status, being granted the status. The refugee is a refugee whenever he or she fulfills the condition as set with the Refugee Convention. So yes, that might be the case, but there's no punishment for that in case it's really indeed a refugee. It might be a few years before you'll come to a conclusion, yes.
Thank you for your comments. So now I'll give floor to some other questions from the audience.
Hello, does this work? Yeah. Hi, my name is Krzysztof Kučmáš. I'm from Department of Security Studies at Charles University. And while I'm somehow basically acquainted with the concept of asylum law, I think I would need a bit of your help as experts on the topic of jurisdiction and frameworks connected to the current Belarusian and Polish crisis. Like basically, which international body or which legislation is active there? Is it United Nations, European Council, etc., etc.? If you could just comment on this, it would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So does anyone from our speakers want to take the answer?
Thank you again for this question. Very interesting one too. For us, being a bit of kind of hidden behind what we do every day, these very logical questions sometimes might not appear in our everyday work because we think it's just so clear and we are so entwined in that very detailed topic we know, then something so logically clear surprises us. So when it comes to, and I'd like to speak a bit about the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights, that's what I know, and I wanted to elaborate first, and I'm glad you brought this issue. When it comes to being responsible for either following the European Convention on Human Rights or breaching it, that would be the European Court of Human Rights that would look at the situation. Should there be an individual complaint brought to the European Court of Human Rights? In reality, in praxis, where it looks like there are people usually lodging these individual complaints. That might happen, it might not happen. As it happened in Libya, sometimes they lodge the complaints with the help of lawyers, but then they disappear, so they never hear about what happened in that individual case. But for us, it helps still to build the case law and to find answers to your question as well. What's the jurisdiction? Who has the jurisdiction? So when we look at Article 1 of the European Convention on Human Rights, the jurisdiction is basically territorial, which is quite clear. Whoever is on the territory of, let's say, Poland in this case, is subjected to the jurisdiction of Poland and should be protected by the laws that are set by the European Convention on Human Rights. At this situation, it's a bit complicated because we are at the borders. So either we are directly at the borders and we have people who already crossed the borders and are detained, are not being let more into a country, or we have people who are still behind that fence, they are not crossing to Poland. And there it comes the question, will be Poland responsible? Could be Poland responsible? And there, again, I would like to find the answer to in the case law that we already have, and that would be the MK and Anders versus Poland, where in 2020 the European Court of Human Rights about the jurisdiction said that when Poland conducted border checks, so there were actually people looking at other people's documentation, passports if they have them, they were already conducting a jurisdiction. So if they deny them from applying for international protection, again, there will be jurisdiction, so we would be able to see whether Poland, in this case, that was it's just coincidence of Poland as well, but whether there was the breach of Article 3 or Article 4 of the Protocol 4. And again, the Hirsi Jama, there's others, that's the landmark decision that I already mentioned, that was the even extraterritorial jurisdiction, because Italy was outside of that territory when they were doing the pushbacks to Libya. And I was actually living in Italy at that time, so that's when my interest in non-refoulement started, actually. And I never thought that I'll be, even 10 years later, I'll be still talking about it. And it was the jurisdiction of Italy was set by conducting de facto control. It was the doctrine of control over persons that the European Code of Human Rights mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you very much for very interesting answers and insights, also from the practice. So we hope that answers your question, right? Okay. Does anyone else want to bring some answers? Okay, please.
Thank you to the panelists for a very interesting conversation. I would just like to ask Mr. Bruner, you used a comparison between Turkey and Belarus when talking about the question of countries being paid off for holding on to external, of refugees of external conflicts. And I was wondering whether perhaps it isn't a bit controversial or hypocritical of European countries accepting the demands of Turkey and essentially criticizing Belarus for doing a similar thing, using refugees as a hybrid threat to European stability. Thank you.
Brilliant argument. Thank you very much for this remark. It is hypocritical, and there are a lot of examples of hypocrisy connected to migration. Actually, it was Russia who used this argument, like, Europe, you pay Turkey, now pay Belarus, and then we can deal with this issue together. And of course, it's very hard to find certain balance, because you have to address the root cause of the problem, or at least the country through which the refugees are, or migrants are flowing to the country. And for this you need money, and the money create corruption. And the more desperately you want to address it, the more money you need, and the more corruption this can create. So it's, I would say, dangerous. And maybe it's too far-fetched metaphor, but we can have a look at Afghanistan, when the international community tried to address the root cause of the conflict and put a lot of money in, especially the US, and what was revealed under the surface. So yes, there is hypocrisy, but I'm sure that other distinguished panelists really know plenty of examples of hypocrisy connected to migration. So that's it from my side.
Thank you very much for the answer. Okay, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your comments. I would like to bring us to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, especially with just this last February, the measure taken by the Colombian government about this temporary protective status that, let's not forget that after Syria, Venezuela has the highest number of forced migrants in the world. And I was reading something about it, and I think it's a very interesting approach because it's, I mean, for those who are not aware of this temporary status, it gives the chance to migrants to engage actually in the life of the country, in the host country, without the risk of falling into irregular activities or being considered irregular migrants. So it gives you access to health, education, of course, being part of the society that you are looking forward to living now. And of course, it encourages the regular trespassing of borders so that the country is able to have a more accurate characterization or demographics of the people who are actually entering. Skilled labor, not skilled labor, educated, highly educated, etc. So my question is, to round up, is what is your educated opinion from your affiliations and your areas of expertise of the feasibility of actually applying some temporary status condition here in Europe?
Thank you very much for the question. So does anyone want to comment first?
I feel I'm talking too much. If it's the case, just tell me, okay? Well, yes. Thank you very much for bringing that up. That's actually another field of interest that I do in my work. That would be the temporary protection. There's a story in the European Union. We do have a regulation on temporary protection. We also have a national law on temporary protection. We all have it set up. It looks great. And it was introduced to be able to deal with these mass migration waves. It was never implemented. And the reason it was discussed, especially in 2015, when so-called crisis, I don't like to call it crisis when you compare it to other states in the world, other regions that are dealing with migration. But let's say it was in 2015, it was discussed whether we're going to implement it or not. But there was no political will to implement it. Probably there was some fear of whether it'll really be temporary, how many people will enjoy it, how many people will benefit, and so on and so on. I'm sure my colleagues will then comment on that. What I do in my research as well is to compare it to the temporary protection in Turkey. They have it. And I'm glad you brought out Colombia, because I'll include it in my research too, just compare it, how is it working there. Because what I've been focusing on Turkey, and they introduced it, because basically Turkey, they never accepted the geographical limitation lift from the convention relating to refugees, which in reality meant that they didn't have a functional refugee or asylum law system. So they introduced a completely new system, and they also introduced the temporary protection for people fleeing Syria and also partially Palestine. But the main numbers are coming from Syria. So what we're trying to do right now to look at how it functions, and then to pose arguments whether we would be able to learn something from, because they already have it in practice, learn something for us, for our European perspective, and see whether we could implement it too. The main fear, which I sense, is the fear of so-called integration and then the protection of family and private life. What happens if people joining and enjoying the temporary protection will integrate into society, which on one hand is desirable. You want them to be able to work, to be able to found families and live here, but then the temporary protection stops. What to do then? Either give them a permanent status or return them back. But if we return them back, they already might have a family life or private life here in the European Union, and that would trigger the European Convention on Human Rights because there is a protection of family and private life. That might be one of the fears. Again, I'm talking very much, so I'll pass the floor to my colleagues. Thank you.
That's perfectly correct that we have a piece of legislation. This is Temporary Protection Directive, which has not been used up till now. Instead of that, these two decisions concerning relocation of applicants for asylum was adopted. So I don't know if there is a lack of political will, but I think that it caused some problems in negotiation on further development of the whole package on migration. That was one of the reasons.
Just a quick look at the history. Again, you can call it as you like. I think important is how you act. You need to have a goodwill. So, and we were able to show this goodwill in the past very well. When OPU started, we accepted 5,600 Bosnians. I think it was called humanitarian admission, if I'm not mistaken. So, but it's only a terminology. The important is goodwill. We accepted them all, and afterwards, those who wanted to stay could apply for permanent resident permit. So basically avoid the asylum procedure completely. When I started, 1998, very shortly, there was a war in Kosovo. And again, I think we call it at that time humanitarian evacuation. So it was not called asylum or subsidiary protection, I think not even temporary protection, but important was the goodwill. We received voluntarily more than 1,000 Kosovars. We took them on planes, they came to the Czech Republic. We offered them accommodation in different hostels, accommodation places offered by the owners to the Interior Ministry. They were happy to rent it for 6 months to the ministry and have there, I don't know, 150, 200 Kosovars. Afterwards, we did not offer them permanent resident permit or possibility, but very quickly they wanted to go back to Kosovo because they heard about their houses being destroyed, property taken. So very quickly, more than 900 out of 1,000 returned back to Kosovo. And for the rest, there was the opportunity to apply for asylum. Many of them got it for humanitarian reasons. So I think we have this word humanitarian already for the second time. And I think last attempt of the temporary protection in the Czech Republic was the case of Chechen refugees. I think it was 2000 or 2001 when was the conflict between Chechnya and Russia, where in one single year we received 18,000 applications for asylum, almost all of them from Chechens. And then we offered this possibility to apply for a temporary protection, and they denied. They all wanted to go to other countries, Austria a lot, but also Belgium, Netherlands, etc. And I think that was the last national attempt of temporary protection, if I'm not mistaken. And you can call it as you want. So I would say I don't like Erdogan. We deal with the victims of his regime every week, be it persecuted Kurds or other minorities or Gülenists. Everyone who is against Erdogan now is called terrorist or Gülenist in Turkey. So I saw the results of his dictatorship, or how you call this regime, every week. But on the other hand, with all respect, they may call it as they want. They host 3.5 million Syrians for almost a decade already. So with all respect, I think we should thank him, pay him, because he helped a lot to the Syrian refugees and also to Europe. And similar to Colombians, with all respect, to receive more than 3 million Venezuelans, fantastic job, and you can call it as you want. Important is the goodwill, in my opinion.
Thank you very much for your insight. Please, does anyone in the audience want to raise some more questions? Please do not hesitate, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for all the very concrete points of view and very detailed information that I've got today. I'm Olta, and I lecture European Union law in Albania, but here I am as a PhD Erasmus student. So thank you very much for all your insights. Well, I was remembering during one of the presentations that one of the journal, but I don't remember the defined source, that when in 2015, when the migration crisis happened in Europe, there was a famous expression circulating in Europe, like when migrants are clicking and pushing out the European borders, the only thing that EU does is getting Mogherini crying and showing compassion. But here on the other side, we have EU legislation, policy, cohesion, laws, etc., etc. And on the other side, we have the, let's say, an attitude of each of member states, like there was many examples of Czech Republic. In your perspective and in what you have touched from the ground, do you think that the things that are not working correctly in regard to migration, management, and so on, does it refer only to the national policy and laws in the Czech Republic, or there is something more that EU legislation is not doing the proper and the correct thing in this situation? Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very interesting question. Okay, let's.
I don't want to take Eliška the first place. It's because she's certainly a better expert than myself managing projects and people and motivating employees to stay for 1 year more. But in my opinion, the basic problem of the EU law is that there are no sanctions. So in my opinion, there is a culture of breach of law when it comes to refugees and asylum seekers almost everywhere in Europe. And you don't see it only at the borders of Poland or Greece or Italy. It's almost everywhere. So there are pushbacks not only in these countries, but there are pushbacks in half of the EU countries, be it the border, Slovakia, Ukraine, Polish, Belarus, Czech Republic at the airport, where there are rejections at the entry very often. So we deal with it every week. So, and there is no sanction. There are no claims. And in the EU legislation or in the EU asylum law, it's like this. You have no way basically how to force them to change. After 3-4 years, you have a decision of the European Court in Luxembourg. But then they change slightly the law, do basically the same, and then you have another 3-4 years until you have a decision of the court in, if not Strasbourg, then in Luxembourg to deny what Hungary, for example, does against NGOs or against refugees. So afterwards they change the policies. But I am very afraid that unless we have real sanctions in the European legislations, there will be little respect or less and less respect for the EU law, and we see it in Poland. Just I think last week they discovered that the constitution is not in line with the European Convention on Human Rights. I think very soon they will discover that the beautiful Polish constitution is not in line with the Refugee Geneva Convention. So if there are no sanctions, the law cannot really work. That's my opinion.
Thank you very much for your answer. Do we have some more questions in the audience? If no, then I will have a question. We have been discussing many drawbacks of the current legal framework for international or European migration. And I'm wondering if you think that there are also some positive trends in this area that were adopted recently. And maybe if not, what would you like to see to happen in the future to make our asylum or migration systems work better? So if you have some insights, and anyone?
Okay, I can start again with very narrow view of the UN Security Council. What positive occurred in this case? The UN Security Council issued, I believe, 5 or 6 resolutions where it tackled climate change as a root cause of migration. The first one was, I believe, in case of Lake Chad Basin, where the UN Security Council said that there must be a certain respect paid to the drying of the lake, and it recognized that environmental degradation leads to security implications as well as migration implications. So we are slowly getting to the point where the problem will be recognized, but the journey will be definitely long and painful. But this is just the narrow view of the UN Security Council. In other fields, I believe other panelists will have much more insightful points.
This is interesting question. Thank you for that. We're usually very used to criticize and try to find the negative aspects in our work. When it comes to positive aspects, in my experience, in my opinion, that would be, I'm still glad the European Court of Human Rights is working and it's still relevant. And it's still, there are people filing the individual complaints, although it does have many negative sides as well. But I'm still happy it works. And when it comes to what I wish for future, my everyday wish really would be simplifying the legal migration process, even unifying with the European Union, just to make it quicker and more simple, even though there are ways for doing security checks, for doing background checks on the applicants, just make it a bit easier. That would make my life easier as well, and I'm sure the applicant's life too. Thank you.
From my perspective, I see one positive trend is remittance, which I recognize like a positive, is increasing remittances flows. Within the last economic crisis, started, let's say, in 90s in Southeast Asia, then Russia, then global economic crises at the end of first decade of this century. So it was interesting that remittances after a short, let's say 1 hour dropping down, was coming increasingly and and recognized a new record. So it means that migration, or the migrants sending the remittances to their countries of origins, to their households in majority, recognize that there is some like a bigger needs of the families or friends. They need the money, so they continue with the remittance in sending, which are very helpful and necessary in the developing countries. And this combination of pandemic or economic crisis, how can we say that, or we will still have time to recognize what kind of crisis is now, which kind of crisis which are now living. So I mean, this is the trend is also is increasing of remittances flow. So it means that especially during the mobile remittances concept, we found a way how to help people in economically poor countries. So that's fine, I believe. Yeah. Lenka, do you want to say something?
So I always see very optimistic future. So I'm criticized by my children because of that. Mother is very optimistic when it is raining. She says, it's beautiful weather, isn't it? Well, but I would appreciate the thing that European Commission withdrew Dublin IV regulation because it was very conflicting, caused many conflicts in European Union, and that the European Commission prepared a proposal, a whole package of complex measures, including positive migration or legal migration and so on. And I hope there will be some consensus among the member states at the end, because without this consensus, we cannot face the next waves of migration, including illegal migration. And on the other side, we should concentrate on integration, the problem of integration, because Europe cannot accommodate the whole world, of course.
Thank you. I help myself with the example of unaccompanied children in Greece. There was a campaign initiated by MP Šojdrová, and we were happy to help her in this attempt to persuade the Czech government to take in at least 10 children. It was impossible with Hamáček, who was unwilling or unable to do anything. But this is a good example. I believe in future in the so-called coalitions of the willings. The state, they really want help. They see this unjust when it comes to the southern countries, very much overburdened by migrants and refugees, and the northern countries who need to help them somehow. And it worked in the cases of unaccompanied children in Greece, that thousands of children were accepted by coalitions of the willing, let's call it this way, countries that accepted them voluntarily, mainly Germany, as always. And similar situation, the disaster in Libya. There were programs from countries in the European Union accepting voluntarily people from Libya, or humanitarian corridors from Libya to Italy. It worked well. So I think, and it's also in the German new coalition agreement that will be probably what Germany would focus on in their new government, to build these coalitions of the willing and try to get more and more states to be included in this coalition of the willings. And I think this is the road. They will be always stupid state persons like Orbán or Janša or Babiš, but there will be, I believe, more and more states who will join this coalition of the willing. And also, to my surprise, the example of the accommodation of the unaccompanied minors in Greece. When I was there with MP Šojdrová, it was a disaster. Children living in squats, sleeping in parks, exposed to different dangers of the street life in the middle of Athens. And now they are almost all accommodated in some places that are suitable for them. There are no more unaccompanied children in Greece who would be jailed in police stations because there was no other suitable place available for them in Greece. So, and this is also the EU, let's say, money or support, that at least this, not tiny, but a group of few thousands of unaccompanied minors in Greece could live a decent life or find a legal way to the states making these coalitions of the willings. And not to be, not to blame the Czech government for doing nothing, I would also like to mention the Czech program Pomoc na místě, that Medevac as well, that I was very much surprised that we took 169 Afghans to come to the Czech Republic, more than 100 Belarusians already. And this Pomoc na místě organizes or supports very good projects, for example, in the Sahel region to help the population in Sahel countries like Mali, for example. And I think these are not all the projects I like, but these are some of the projects are certainly good and helping to the local population in distant countries. So I see some positive points, but I think we need Dodson Pítrová to be more often with us, because very often I'm pessimistic.
Probably no surprise that I'll comment. I forgot to say one thing, which I think is a very positive trend, and I would be ashamed not to say that comes from my experience as a refugee law teacher. When I started to teach refugee law 10 years ago, it was basically a very niche area. Just few people would visit the subject, the course, and few people would study that. No one thought it's relevant, and my colleague Vera Hanuska is doing it here for many, many years. That she definitely would have more to comment on that. But it was a very niche area. When I started to specialize myself in migration refugee law, people would look at me like, why do you actually want to do it? And because they thought there'll be no work. And in that time, what I see as a positive trend is we have more and more students studying this area of law. We do even have a special module on loads of subjects that are within the module, which is a unique thing in Europe. And what brings me joy is then you meet experts who went through this model or through these courses, and then the debate is more and more specialized, and there are well-founded arguments, and that really pleases me. So that will be another positive trend, in my opinion.
Thank you very much for your... do you want to add something?
Now it works. But did you hear me? Okay, so I will. I will need a table, if I can. Could you help me to move this table to the center? Great, thank you. So, maybe can I use my professor voice? Is it fine for you? It's better for me because I need. Oh, that's. I have not enough hands. Okay. If you want, I can hold the microphone. No, thanks. It's against the rules, pandemic rules. Okay, so we have, let's say, something like concept of climate migration, and Tomáš already mentioned that there is some positive progress in the questions of recognition, the climate, refugees, migrants, movers, etc. Yeah, there is a lot of categories. Yeah, that's it. And now we have a more generally recognized category of labor economic migration. So let's to talk about the labor. Yeah, labor migrants. Yeah, labor migrants. And this is just from the last research we did with a colleague from Columbia University, that we based off their job, because they published all together with the World Bank 2 reports about the estimation of climate internal migrants in the world to the middle of the century. So last version of the report from this summer is more than 210,000 million climate internal refugees in the world. We can expect that it will be like a bigger number, but let's say 200 million internal refugees, internal climate migrants. It means that people who will be displaced because of any negative climate impacts, okay, within their countries. We can expect that some of them will also cross the international border, and then we can expect they will be recognized something like a climate refugee, climate migrants, climate mover, etc., with some kind of temporary or permanent protection. And my question is, and that's the provocation, so usually labor migrants are people who has any job, they lost the job, and that's why they move to another city, to another country, trying to find a job, or they have some ambitions, they want to receive a better job or to live in better livelihood conditions. That's why they are moved, okay? Yeah, outside the country of origin or from their habitats. What about the climate will produce the people lost the jobs, or they lost their livelihood, or worse, their livelihood conditions, okay? These people will be, according to this concept, labor migrants. So they will apply, for example, within some programs like Czech Republic already has some permission, job permission and some permanent status to stay here, or they will be climate migrants, because at the beginning it was some weather conditions which destroy their livelihood conditions or their jobs. I'm sorry for this not so much nice diagram or something like that, but I believe it's better just only to explain. So how can we recognize if the people are labor economic migrants or they are climate migrants which need any kind of support, assistance, or something like that? But firstly, I forgot to say that I don't want to speak about this like immigrants from small islands or low-lying islands from the coastal areas, which are frequently at risk of sea level rise, let's say, okay, hurricanes or floods. I'm speaking about the farmers from inland countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America. Yeah? I'm speaking about the people who are affected in cities by increasing temperature and hot waves. Yeah? So this kind of people, which are like something in the middle of this concept of labor or economic migration and climate migration. So my question for you, like lawyers, is how can we recognize if really these people, and now we are speaking among the hundreds million of people, how they could be recognized? And another argument, we frequently mentioned the European migration or refugees crisis, and we were speaking about how much? 1.5 million people. 1.5 million people. Now we are speaking about more than 200 million people. Excuse me, please.